Good morning, Dr. Kudzai. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I have to say, I feel very blessed to be on this call with you. So you're not that familiar with A, me, but B, Opportunity Knocks as a podcast. So number one, it's a trust walk, right? So
Absolutely.
I feel grateful that you chose to say yes to this podcast and to me, and also to building a relationship. So that means a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle. I mean, I always jump at the opportunity of being able to just talk with women, within, this age 30 to 80 age
Exactly.
range. And really like I look at it as an opportunity for service as well because it's really
Wow.
important to me to be able to bring like a level of like understanding, knowledge, empowerment
Mm.
to women during this transition.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you saying that because without knowing that much about you or you, not me, those words that you're using are very much in alignment with me. So, one of the reasons why I became a transformational coach was because I wanted to be in service of others.
Mhm.
And so it seems like along your way in your journey for your profession, you have not lost sight of the fact that that is the reason why you chose to become a doctor, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to do that, right? Is that sometimes we get on a path and it's hard for us to remember why we got into any one thing. And it reminds me of like when I left the corporate world and I actually chose to become a coach. Um, I was working with all these people. I did it via the academic route at business schools, and they were paying for my coaching certification. But I had all these people that were so burned out in what they were doing. And I
Mhm.
said, I just don't understand why you're here. If you're not happy, then perhaps you need to choose a different profession. And they kept saying to me, oh, just you wait, wait till you're around these students. And I said, no, I believe it's choice.
Yes.
So I really resonate with what you're saying. And just want to add one other thing to that is that I only interview people by referral.
Mm.
So that is something that this podcast to me is very sacred in the way that I really kind of it is because of service. It's not because I'm like, oh, I thought that I was going to have this successful podcast and I was going to
Yeah.
get all these advertisers. This started during COVID to serve women
Yeah.
as they were in corporations losing positions. And so I love what you're saying. So why don't we step back a little bit because it's so
Yeah.
typical of me and I see that we're in alignment with each other that we immediately could go deep.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. How did you actually choose to become a doctor? Like, where did you grow
Yeah.
up? How did it all come to be? Because one of the things I loved about reading your bio is you did Doctors Without Borders, and I always wanted to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really interesting because I think for me, my desire to go into medicine stemmed from just my upbringing, right?
Mm,
And the different transitions that I went through. So I was, my dad was here in the United States for medical school. Well, he came here for on a refugee scholarship for undergrad from Zimbabwe.
wow.
My mom, her family was wealthy enough to send her here to college from Zimbabwe as well. And so they happened to meet. Even though my mom was at the University of South Dakota, my dad, was at the University of Michigan, and they had a mutual friend there. And so they met through the mutual friend. They met, they got married, and my dad went to med school, and he did his residence here. And so they met, got married, had 3 kids.
Mm,
And then my dad, again, he really like his purpose behind coming to the United States to be a physician
mm,
was that in Zimbabwe, he was told that the highest he would ever become was a teacher.
mm,
And so he had ambitions beyond that.
clearly.
So he came here, and so his desire was truly to be able to go back to Zimbabwe and give back to the community, right? That's where it's really stemmed from. So after Zimbabwe became independent, he moved us back, and I grew up in Zimbabwe. I got to see him practice, and he was very insistent, though, that we came to the office, we understood,
The
the
process.
roots, yeah, and where like we were able to go to private schools and all those different things, and while in Zimbabwe, but he wanted us to understand where this came from. He wanted us to understand that this was community, right? These people
Beautiful.
entrusted, their well-being, their health,
Yes.
to him, and it was important that we had an understanding that, the opportunities that we had were a result, of, what he was doing in service,
Mm-hmm.
of people. So, and it's so funny because, I thought he spends so much time at work. He doesn't come to our, school activities and,
Performances.
yeah, and performances. And so I think for me at an early age, I kind of was like, I don't think I want to be, a physician. But I think what really turned the tide for me is when I was in high school and I became a member of this organization called Interact. It's part of Rotary.
Oh, very cool.
And so in Zimbabwe in high school, there are these different clubs that you can be a part of. And
Mm.
Interact was one of the organizations or clubs that we could be a part of that allowed us to get outside the private
Your
school
area, yeah.
premises. Yeah, the
Mhm.
private. So for me it was just so great that, okay, well, this is a way out, right? For me it was just purely a way to get out of the pink prison, which is
Bubble.
which is which
Mhm.
was the school that I went to. And but I found that we would raise money and through knit-a-thons and different things, and then we would actually buy uh, school, books, supplies for remote villages, like kids in remote villages.
Mm.
But we didn't just do that. They would take us to the remote village. We would hand over the things that we had
So you
purchased,
had it in
and
your
they
bag.
were so grateful. And I thought to myself, in a country where the patriarchy is so strong, right?
Mm.
The patriarchy is so strong.
Yes.
As a female, if I wanted to do anything that made a difference in this world, it would truly be number one, I'd have to have a degree that was a
Mhm.
respectable degree. But I also knew that being able to take care of people's health would
Mm.
be something that, and but being not just being able to take care of their health, but advocating for how funds would be used and
Absolutely.
decisions that were made. That level of advocacy was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that the right decisions were made for women and children. And so
Beautiful.
that's kind of what started my journey into medicine.
So when back then, and the patriarchy was even stronger back then.
Hmm.
It must have been somewhat of an uphill battle for you to choose this as your path, even though your father and mother
Hmm.
possibly helped lay a little bit of that foundation for you. But
Yeah,
that also requires that's kind of stressful too, because you have to
yeah,
live up to an expectation.
correct.
Um, what was that like in your country? Because Zimbabwe is beyond patriarchal, it's also just not an easy environment to grow up in.
Yeah. Well, I think the part that I actually want to shine a light on is that the education system is considered very strong.
Wow,
It was
that's
rooted in the British, yeah, it was rooted in the
oh,
British system. So Zimbabwe had just become independent in 1980, and even till now, the education system is considered one of the best in Africa, and Zimbabweans are considered to be probably, when it comes to literacy, the most literate in the
why
continent.
is that? Just curious.
I think it's
So, I
just
mean,
the
just so I
nature.
learn and get
Yeah.
educated
I
for my
think the
myself.
nature of they value education.
Hmm.
And we had a president at the time, the very first president, Mugabe, who also valued that level of education. And so that it was just really it was something that
Ingrained.
was ingrained, yes. So even in our culture today, it's deeply ingrained. And I was fortunate to be a part of that. So it really wasn't as difficult as you may think
Mhm.
because it was already accepted that, education was of premium value and the system that was in place was excellent. So when I came to University of Michigan for my undergrad,
Mhm.
even though I did high school in Zimbabwe, I came in with 28 credits.
Wow,
So,
that's amazing.
just so that you understand the
Yeah.
degree of how respected the education system was there, I was able to do college in 3 years.
Wow,
So
that's
I did my O levels and my A levels, which is under the British system
yeah.
in Zimbabwe, and it was recognized here in the United States.
Wow. So, do you feel that that same integrity was ingrained in all the other people that surrounded you? So you were like sort of already set up with a standard.
Yes, we were already set up with a standard. I think so integrity around like education or within like systems? Because there's corruption, right? There's corruption that
That's what
exists.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
that we know there's corruption, but I think for me, because I saw it, I wanted to be different.
mm,
I wanted to be the one who made sure that funds or money that was dedicated to what it was supposed to be for went to that.
mm,
And so because again, there was a lot of that I
yeah.
bore witness to. It was very important to me that there were people who made the right decisions because that was ingrained in my dad. I think he went to college in the United States, medical school, he did his residency, in Rochester, New York at the University of Rochester and was very well respected. He got a key to the city of Rochester by the mayor because he was that respected within the community. And so that level of respect, I think, is something that, I
Prior
just,
to.
yeah, it really inspired me. I was like, I want to be able to do that, but I want to do it for women and children.
Mm. So when you went to the University of Michigan, did you go pre-med? Like you knew you were going to medical school at that point in time?
So it's interesting because
I was
at that
wondering because
time,
I have a daughter who was kind of going one direction and then is choosing a different, and then she's like, "You don't understand. You can't go back." I was like, "That's not true. It just takes you longer." Like,
so for me, what happened is because high school in Zimbabwe is 6 years, and
mhm,
so I got accepted into the University of Zimbabwe Medical School because medical school comes right after. But I was committed that I wanted to have a more diverse undergraduate experience.
mhm,
So I took the risk and I said, I'm going to go undergrad and, really get to live life and experience what it's like to be independent from my parents. And then I will apply to med school, and if I get in, great. If I don't get in, I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do.
wow, interesting. But you
Yeah.
know what would you say your greatest lesson was from that?
So, yeah, like I think it was perseverance because the American system was very different from the British system. And so I was used to getting like very, very high grades in in Zimbabwe because the
Mhm,
British system focused not only on just test taking, like multiple choice, but you also had short answer exams, long answer exams for every single subject.
mhm,
Whereas there's more standardized testing, in the United States. And so I did well my first year, but then my second year, I started to falter in my grades. And I had to really persevere and turn things around, which I was able to do. But
mhm,
it took a lot of just resilience. And I was
mhm,
homesick. I was
mhm, I'm
honestly like in
sure.
Michigan, negative
I was going
77
to say
with
it must
wind
have been
chill.
freezing. Like,
Negative 77 with wind chill was
yeah,
no joke. And so
yeah.
I was homesick. I missed my friends. I missed my family. And I was kind of struggling, in learning how to, you know, live a
Assimilate into
life.
American
Yeah,
culture.
assimilate into American culture.
The supposed American culture, like I feel like every state is a different country in the United States. Actually, every
Yeah,
city can be a different state in the United States. It's just like any other country for that matter.
yeah,
But I mean, Michigan's so different than Los Angeles, and I know you live in
right.
LA now. So, this concept of service, if we're going to use
Hmm.
that as one of our themes, and choosing to work with women. Uh,
Hmm.
what are the benefits of working with women and what are the challenges of working with women,
Yeah,
both internally as a doctor and externally? Just curious to understand because we have our medical challenges, right? Then we
right.
have emotional and medical are integrated, right? So if we go
Yep.
back into this whole thing about, why I chose to do Soulful is because the gathering we're doing on March 21st first is because I feel like everybody treats their health in silos. And
Yeah.
yet the emotional part of it is so
Yeah.
much part of the physical part. And I know you probably get challenged with that too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think for me, what the benefits are is I tend to see, like, I look at women and I think, our voices may not necessarily always be heard,
Hmm.
right? Like, I think that that is something that I felt personally, like within the culture that I grew up in, like children are seen and not heard. And so I kind of had to adjust from being a kid that grew up in the United States until I was 8, and then moving into this culture where I
Wow.
just didn't understand. And I just felt like my voice was just, it couldn't be like I had to, calm it down because kids,
Hmm.
So when I think about women and children, part of the reason why my heart goes out because there's a level of, okay, relatability or, I want to be able to like elevate like your
Mhm.
voice or really hear and understand what's going on with you, not just from the physical, but again, from the emotional, because a lot of decisions when it comes to your health, they are made whether like you can't just give a treatment plan and this is and bye, but it's like what is going to be in alignment with
Mhm.
what matters to you? Like what are your personal goals? They're all we're all individuals, and I think it's important to be able to identify like outside of just what's going on in your body, like what aligns with you in terms of what would work for you, because it's not
Yeah.
going to be the same for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying because I do think that a lot of women aren't always advocates for themselves, like you're saying. And sometimes we're sort of brought up in a system that we believe the doctors to be the only voice,
Yeah.
and that we don't develop our own plan based upon all the research we're taking from different places, right? And it's hard because
Yeah.
everybody has a different opinion, right? And so, how do you go about helping women be better advocates for themselves? Just curious.
So I do it on different levels. I do it. So one of the things that I have been fortunate to be able to do is I currently work as the director of advocacy and outreach
Oh,
for Alloy Health,
oh, okay.
and that was a role that I created with the co-founders because I realized that there were certain things beyond just helping women with, hormone therapy
Yeah.
that they needed. What I saw where the gaps were when it came to like, for example, certain cultures, right? Like I didn't see, black women or women of color represented, right,
Hmm.
in the conversation. So it was like, how do we get that messaging to them? So what I do now is I do sometimes like support groups,
Hmm.
for either women of color, and the goal is really just to help them navigate what they may be encountering within the health system.
Hmm.
And it's not just me because I co-host it with community engagement manager. So it's not just the doctor's voice being heard in there, but it's also, another woman who's a community engagement manager. And what we do is we have a group of women, sometimes anywhere between, 15 to 30,
Hmm.
and we just discuss like some of the things that are going on, but the beautiful thing is that it's not always just what I have to say or share. Somebody else in the group may say, oh, I've dealt with that and this is how I did it, when somebody encounters a problem. So it's really a space
Hmm.
where everyone can support and help one another, because I think it's important for women to be able to hear from other women
I
who may
think
have
that's how they.
gone through the same situation, and they're like, wow, I identify myself. I see myself there. Wow, I think I'm going to try that.
Yeah,
So,
and it's almost like you said, advocacy, right? It's like it
yeah,
almost gives an immediate recognition that it's safe or to try it or to trust, right?
100%.
How does one get involved in that? First of all, I don't know what alloy health is, just so
Okay.
that you know, because I'm
Sure.
not in the medical field. Um, but it'd be helpful, I think, because I do think there's a lot of women, whatever it might be, whether it be heart health, whether, there are these silos, but it's interesting to know that it's available for women of color, number one, but not only that, but specifically, like you have support groups.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
around a particular topic, which is actually kind of nice.
Yeah. And so I also work with, like there's another different, groups or communities of women, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through Alloy, but work with even different communities where we actually create these workshops,
Mm,
around whether it's perimenopause, menopause, midlife, just being able to create engagement, right? We may start with a quiz or like, 10 questions, within the group. And then it's like, okay, let's look at, the data. Let's look at
mhm,
what the evidence shows. And it just becomes this fun, lighthearted conversation while they learn. And
mhm.
it brings them together, because I think it's really important that that engagement, it's not a lecture, but it's really how do we come together and be able to talk about, you know, what's going on,
Openly.
and
Hmm.
very openly,
Yeah.
And so that's where I think
So is Alloy only online? Just so that
so
I know,
it's a
or they
telehealth
know.
platform. Yeah, so it's a
Ah,
telehealth platform.
mm,
And what we do is we offer all the different resources when it comes to, whether it's like some hormone therapy options, whether it's skin, estrogen
okay.
face cream, whether it's GLP-1s, whether it's sexual health options. We offer everything, but we try to make sure that we're also educating women, so we
Mm-hmm.
offer webinars as well on very topic specific things with different experts. We
Mm-hmm.
also offer, again, support groups is what we've been doing, offering support
Perfect.
groups for women. And
Mm-hmm.
then we also, try to just like part of my role is to go out into the community and see where there may be a need for the conversation to be expanded. And so I've been to like, the First AME church here in Los Angeles. They
Beautiful.
wanted to be able to talk about it. They'd never talked about sex, within their, at church. So we
Maybe.
did
Yeah.
a workshop there where we talked about, just the hormonal changes that occur within our bodies, as well as how
Because
it
it
impacts our
is very
mood and
different
sex.
for every culture for that matter, right? So
100%.
my sister passed away a year ago of heart disease. She had a heart attack, sudden heart attack. So
Sorry
I've
to
been
hear that.
learning a lot about, speaking of when we're talking about GLPs, thank you so much. When we're talking about GLPs, but when we're also talking about specifically HRT
Yeah.
and how that relates to the heart. So that's actually a great segue for us to talk a little bit about these, some of which are on trend, right?
Mhm.
But then it's beyond trend for me. Of course, it's
Yeah.
about health and integration, as we know. So tell me your philosophy, more specifically around GLPs,
Yeah.
peptides,
Yeah.
which is also very hot right now.
I know.
And I feel like, in some ways, human behavior in general, we always come up with these amazing tools, and then somehow we find ourselves on the extreme ends on either side.
Yes.
That is just human nature.
Yeah.
Where do we find the help in it? Where is there harm?
Yeah. So I mean, you raised a very, a very interesting question. And so here's what I say. There is no quick fix.
No.
Okay. There is no, like, I want to dispel that immediately because I think sometimes these can be marketed as like, oh my gosh, like, and I get patients who come to me and they're like, I want this or I want that, and this is why, because I've read this. And it's so important to realize that each person is an individual.
Hmm.
Okay.
That,
Just because your girlfriend is doing X, Y, and Z doesn't necessarily mean, because I get patients who say that my girlfriend is on this, I want to be on that. And I'm like, wait, 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 wait. Let's take 10 steps back
roll it
because
back. Slow your
yeah,
roll.
let's roll it back because it is so important to assess each person based on their individual medical history, their individual medications, their individual family history to
Amen.
determine what is best for them. So I know like there's certain people who are great candidates, right, for, a lot of options. But we have to start with lifestyle. You
Mm,
know, we have to start with, okay, let's look at your nutrition. Let's look at your are you doing any resistance exercise, right? Not just because I have patients who'll come in and they'll say, "Oh, I do lunges in my room every morning." And I'm like, we've got to look at muscle, right? That is the metabolic organ.
hmm.
We need to look at muscle. So, and I'm not saying that you do that outside of everything else, but
Yeah.
it has to be
In
like
conjunction.
multiple tools, that we're bringing together. And it's not like things are going to change overnight or you're going to be fixed overnight. It takes steps to be able to assess, okay, when do we incorporate this? How do we incorporate this? Is this a good fit for you based on how you respond to other things? So that's why I think I always tell my patients, um, okay, GLP-1s, we do know that they are great. They're peptides. They're a form of a peptide, right?
Totally.
And what
I was
they do,
having this
we,
conversation with somebody actually yesterday, and she was saying it's not a peptide. I'm like, it's a peptide.
yeah,
Like, I'm like,
yeah,
but it's so, people are so misinformed, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. And so, like, I love that there is a role for GLP-1s because I'm a believer. I am not a believer that GLP-1s are good for everybody.
Hmm.
Okay. So, I mean, we know how GLP-1s work, right? They work in three ways. They work on the brain, right, to, quiet the food noise. They also delay gastric emptying. But the way that I am like so like enamored about them is that they also help with insulin resistance. So when your pancreas, like when you have a lot of glucose circulating in your system, right, that leads to inflammation. If your pancreas is not releasing insulin and you're able to get that glucose into cells, you have glucose circulating in your bloodstream, and that leads to inflammation. Inflammation leads to heart disease, inflammation leads to Alzheimer's, inflammation leads to all these different chronic conditions.
And I
So,
think that's a really important point is that people need to understand why everybody keeps talking about inflammation. And that is why, is because
mhm.
it leads to potential higher risks of disease.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so if you already have certain markers, right, that are showing that you're pre-diabetic or, like, so there's certain things that we look at when it comes to just, signs of inflammation within your system that, look, if we're dialing in certain things and it's not changing, really GLP-1s are leveling off the playing field for certain women who are not able to overcome, a hump,
Mm.
when it comes to whether it's, you know, weight loss, and I'm
Right.
talking
Yeah.
about certain amounts of weight loss. I'm not talking about, trying to get, from a
My last five
BMI.
pounds off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So I think it's just important that there are so many cardiometabolic changes that occur within our bodies during that midlife transition that it's not a one size fits all for everybody. It's really takes you have to look at all the different things like your lab results, your LP little a, that's another lipoprotein A.
Mm.
Are you at risk, a genetic risk for high cholesterol or cardiovascular disease? Like that also plays into decisions that we make when we look at, you
It's
know,
all of it.
GLP-1s and peptides.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I feel that like you said, people are quick to jump on the bandwagon and want a quick fix, right? Like so
Mhm.
people are all of we live in a microwave society, right? So it's like let's just quickly like come to the answer. And for me, midlife health has been a bit of a reminder actually to when I had a baby. So I didn't have an easy time getting pregnant, and I had to figure out, I had to go through a lot of different phases
Yeah.
to figure out exactly what was going on in my body, right? I think that comes with the stress and inflammation if I was to look back on my lifestyle back then.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that it's very much the same way where it's like sudden weight gain, fogginess in your brain,
Yep.
um, lack of energy, whatever it is. And some of the things that, and I'm a very like health conscious person, right?
Yeah.
So it's been also, I find different doctors run blood tests differently. So,
Yep.
what is your philosophy? Because blood tests are expensive, right? What is your philosophy around blood panels and all of that? Because some people say, oh, you don't need all that. Like,
Mhm.
you don't need to go to that depth. But just curious.
Yeah. So I always like whenever I have a patient, I have a list of screening labs that I draw. And these are not necessarily just your basic, oh, just your, your kidney function, your liver function. I want to do a deeper dive when it comes to looking at, okay, what are your risks? Your risk for cardiovascular disease as well. Is there any evidence of maybe like inflammation in your system? So I do a bit of a deeper dive when it comes to just initial screening labs for all my patients, depending on their symptoms as well. If they have significant fatigue, we may do additional testing for, whether or not you're exposed to just, lead, like any heavy metals,
Hmm.
right? So I'm looking at all things, but when it comes to, I think the sometimes what can happen is like when it comes to hormone levels, if depending on if you're in perimenopause, we know that they fluctuate, day to day. So if the patient is insistent and they really want to know what their estrogen and progesterone is, I always tell them in perimenopause that we can do it, but just so that you know, it's not an indicator of exactly what's going on and how you're feeling. They can come back normal, but I don't follow labs just to get your symptoms controlled
Mm-hmm.
because it really is about what's going on in your body. If you're postmenopausal, we already know that your estrogen and progesterone levels are going to be very low. So it's again managing your symptoms over following a number. I only do hormone level numbers is if you're on the highest dose of like a transdermal option, like the patch, and
Hmm.
you're still not responding. My question is, are you actually absorbing,
Mm. Well,
from
that's an interesting question because I feel like when we talk about HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and It's very interesting because if I look specifically at my situation where I had three babies, with every baby, I found out something different. Like, oh, you're hypothyroid after your second baby. Oh,
Hmm.
well, that must be why I actually had trouble like getting pregnant, number one. But like other things, like why I always had trouble losing weight. Like, but I probably was always borderline, but nobody ever told me.
Right.
Um, but I think about like as we go later in life, like the trouble of losing weight and things like that. But I waited to go on a thyroid medication, which I was like, oh, I'm going to handle it naturally. I'm going to do cow thyroid, whatever. It didn't actually work. And so
Yeah.
and I think that when we think about HRT, like it was like a game changer for me.
Yeah.
I could think clearly again. And I see so many women who resist it for years and are wonder why they don't feel well. And I think this goes back to like also when you're talking about culturally diverse, socioeconomically diverse. Sometimes they're just not always educated because I'm half Mexican, so like I see it in my family,
Mhm.
and I think about like why don't people get on HRT sooner?
So I think there's still some concerns about,
Cancer?
cancer. There's some concerns about that. There's some concerns about people who just are like, I don't want to introduce anything into my body unless absolutely necessary. And I just have friends who, believe that I don't want to be on hormones because I don't want to gain weight. There are a lot of different reasons. And it's so interesting because a lot of people who eventually get to a point where they are like, I can't live like this anymore. And they're like, why didn't I do this sooner? So
Mm.
I do get that a lot from patients.
It's
And
funny
I
because I
think,
was actually very versed because of cancer too.
yeah,
And my doctor kept assuring me, like, I promise you, it's like such a rarity, but I didn't want to believe it. Kind of like the thyroid medication,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, so do you find that in what correlates that understanding? Is it research that people then finally buy into it because they see, or
So I think a lot of it is education because I think with the Women's Health Initiative, I'm not sure if you've heard of that study that came out in 2002, that really, you know, really, scared a lot of women
mm,
because in 2002 they came out with a study that they mentioned that, hormone therapy, we noticed an increased risk of breast cancer. Unfortunately, the data was misinterpreted. So really they came out before with a press conference before that data was even disseminated amongst the medical
interesting.
community. So at that point, people were already scared. They wanted off their hormones. And I was doing my residency training during that time, I remember. And I remember I was a first year resident in obstetrics and gynecology. And just, I remember thinking, oh, hormones are bad. They're not anything that I want to ever prescribe because I will get sued and somebody will get breast cancer. So
Mhm,
that was not part of my practice in the early ages
mhm.
of practicing as an OBGYN. And I think over the last probably 5 to 7 years, there has been more and more conversation about how this data had been misinterpreted. And so there has been more people willing to talk about it, more people willing to say, I am miserable and uncomfortable, and I really want to know what my options are when it comes to hormone therapy. There have been people who just basically were like, we're not going to take this laying down. And
Mm.
so, especially within the medical community as well, as we've aged, as we've started to have the same symptoms. So the it's been a grassroots movement, from people just choosing to speak louder using platforms on social media to be able to say, look, let's talk about this because this is there's a disservice to women, according to the study that was really not reflecting
Accurate, yeah,
accurate
or completely
information.
accurately
And
like reported.
so the more that we've talked about it, the more people have been willing to actually say, okay, I'm willing to try.
Mm. It's almost like you need a counter study. I'm sure there has been, by the way, but like sometimes it's not even about counter study. It's actually about whoever's the loudest voice in
Yep.
the room sometimes.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I think also like one of the things that I learned was there's a higher increase of heart risk or heart failure risk if you're not on HRT2 during your midlife. Is that true?
So what we say is, and I'll explain the reason why.
Yeah.
So estrogen has effects of helping with elasticity in tissue. So when we think about the vagina, right, it
Mm-hmm.
helps it stay elastic, but it's the same thing with blood vessels,
Hmm.
right? The older you get, like we, off of like as you go through menopause, like the further away you get, from that time you had your last menstrual period, your arteries tend to get stiff and
Hmm.
stiff and stiff and stiff. And so that's why we say if you've gone more than 10 years past since your last menstrual period, your risk for cardiovascular disease approaches that of a man. So,
Interesting.
and that's because, again, estrogen has this effect of helping the blood vessels with become elastic.
Mm-hmm.
And that elasticity helps with adequate blood flow. When
Mm-hmm.
it becomes stiff, it's easier for um, plaques, or clots to develop. And that's where we say the risk of heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, heart attacks or strokes develop the longer you've been off. So we say the window of opportunity of starting hormone therapy is anytime under 60 or within 10 years of your last menstrual period. And simply because we say that that window is when, you haven't had the detrimental impact on your cardiovascular system of the absence of estrogen.
Okay, that's very good. That's actually a great way for me to comprehend it a little bit better. I was actually at a conference for UCLA cardiology, women's cardiology, and they
Hmm.
mentioned the study. And so I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. So let me ask you another question. Like, as we're looking to the future for your own practice, what do you think is going to be an increase for you in this stage of like, perimenopause and menopause health? And what do you think would be like the decrease, just as far as trend goes? Just curious.
Hmm. So I really think that I believe that the FDA is going to have an FDA approved form of testosterone. That
Okay.
that's I mean we were advocacy grassroots advocacy got the box warning off of vaginal estrogen and all vaginal products. The next benchmark that the grassroots community of doctors is looking at is getting an FDA approved form of testosterone for women.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I do know a significant number of people on it. I'm not on it, but I have actually wondered as I continue to grow wiser.
Hmm. I mean, and I think here's the thing, the studies are small, right, that we do have. So at this point, I look at a lot of urologists who have taking care of both men and women. They see the benefits of testosterone in men and they've seen the benefits in women. And their argument is like, why is it so difficult,
Mhm.
for us to be able to get it for women if we know so clearly how it helps men? And the ease with which they can prescribe it for men, their comfort at prescribing it with men for men, is something that as OBGYNs, we focus on data, information, studies, and unfortunately, we just don't have,
Enough data.
enough data and studies to be able to go ahead and, you know, say that we can conclusively say X, Y, and Z. The only thing that we can say at this point in time is that for what we call hypoactive sexual, HSDD,
Yeah.
which is just a low libido,
Okay.
that impacts your quality of life. That is the indication that all the societies have actually said that testosterone is, approved for that. But we don't have any guidelines outside of, for a low libido that is impacting your quality of life.
And it isn't impacting your quality of life such a subjective way of
Hmm.
looking at it
Yep,
because that's so like one person's impact and what they're going to say is another. And that goes back to being your own advocate, right? And being able
exactly.
to say it out loud. And many women don't even want to talk about sexuality.
Exactly.
And I'd say like my generation and above are a lot more quiet about it.
Yeah.
We're probably
Yeah.
getting better and more embodied as we get older.
Yep. Yeah.
So I know we need to be mindful of time. I am so looking forward to having you on the panel and hearing
Yeah.
more about all of the things that you are looking to grow within your practice.
Yeah.
I would love for you to leave us with one last question, which is, what are your top five core values and how do you use them in your day-to-day life?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and I think when I think about core values, I think we talked about one, which is service.
Mhm.
That's one. I also think about like faith and spirituality.
Beautiful.
Like that's, important to me. I also think of compassion,
Mm,
that's another one because like being able to be with people no
mhm.
matter where they are, you know,
Absolutely.
is part of being able to connect with women.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Um, because
Because
we
they
all,
need to know that you're with them.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Even if I don't have the answer, it's just being able to be with them is way more important than being able to have all the answers.
Mhm.
So compassion is another one. Um, I think integrity, is
I do
important. I
too.
get that from my dad.
Yeah, I got that. Like that and service were like right away.
And I think, when I was thinking about a fifth one, I think, just being able to have like just a level of freedom.
I love that. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important, freedom of choice, right? Freedom to decide
Mhm.
how you want to actually operate as a doctor, but also how do you want to receive care as well. And I mean, we're blessed on
Yeah.
some levels. We are blessed overall.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, I would love to know where people can find you, or if there's anything last that you would like to share with our audience as far as your your level of interest and integrity around women's heart, not women's heart health, but women's health in general,
Mhm.
and being their best advocate.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important, whenever you go in, to a doctor or, any type of when you're interacting with the healthcare system, being able to know that like you have agency, you have choice. And sometimes it may just be reframing or asking, you know, your provider, your clinician, like, what are all the options that I have? And can you discuss the pros and the cons of each option?
Mm,
Because sometimes I think, again, that patriarchal way of looking at healthcare, like, and when it comes to women's health, we realize it doesn't work. It's shared decision making at this point,
mm,
right? And we find that shared decision making has the highest chance of success when it comes to a treatment plan.
absolutely. And where can people reach you? I mean, I know you have an active Instagram following,
Yes.
but in addition, where else can you can tell them
Yeah,
all your
so
details.
so Alloy Health, it's at my www.myalloy.com. So
Mhm.
I'm their director of director of advocacy and outreach.
Yeah, you're not
And I
allowed
also
to
see
say
patients.
diversity anymore.
I know, director of
I get
advocacy and
confused
outreach.
too.
And so I serve there, but I also see patients on their platform. And then I also have my own practice. It's Menopause Medicine and Mindset. So
I like that.
www.menopausemedicineandmindset.com. And yeah, those are the
And then
best
on
ways to reach me.
Instagram, it's
At Dr. Kudzai,
perfect. I love it.
Uh,
Well, I just want to thank you for your time. And I really just learned so much from you. And I look forward to having you on the panel on March 21st and you just sharing all of your beautiful gifts with the rest of the world.
oh, thank you, Michelle. This was such an honor and a privilege.
All right. Well, we'll chat soon.
Okay, sounds good.